Often, I think we desire our lives to be stable and sure, like the tranquility, solidarity, and peace of still waters. We wish our life's journey to unfold as we envision and imagine. But this is not the way of things. From the day we are born, we are immersed in the current and flow of a force that cascades over us all. As it washes over us, around us, through us, it dissolves parts of us away, while it remakes and reshapes our understanding of all things, including ourselves. Sublime in its power, this mysterious force of change is sometimes soft and gentle, but is more often torrential, difficult, and unrelenting. We might feel as if we were being caught in the current of a mighty river or being enveloped in the power of a great storm. Often, even though we have done our best, we must watch that which is precious to our hearts, that which we cling to, break free and plummet into the depths. When we have been thus broken and humbled, the question lingers: for what purpose are we placed at the mercy of such a force? For what cause? My name is Melody Curtin. Let's see, growing up, I would describe myself as pretty energetic. I also a little volatile, probably, growing up a little bit. My parents described me as a free spirit. I just kind of had this idea of whatever I want to do, I can do it, and I just have to figure it out. I loved sports and being active, but I also, liked doing music and some of the more, I loved reading and stuff like that. So I would say, overall, I had a lot of interests in, huge variety of things. I liked being outdoors. I grew up as kind of a tomboy, didn't really like to, wear girl clothes or anything like that till I decided I needed to start thinking about those things. So fishing, camping, hiking, playing street hockey with my brothers, inline skating, stuff like that. Yeah, so I moved around a lot, and I never saw that as a problem. I always kind of, a new adventure, whether or not going back and looking at that, if it affected me, I don't know, but I always just was happy to, new school, new friends, let's, I wasn't really shy in that way. And we moved overseas in Taiwan during high school, and that was, I think, huge for my development. I mean, it opened my eyes hugely, to just being in a different culture, experiencing different things, being in a place where I didn't speak the language and having to deal with that sort of was, I think, a very maturing process for me. My journey began with an excitement for life that came with being young and new to the world. I lived with a beautiful anticipation for where the next adventures in life would lead me, and would dream of the wonders that lay ahead on the trail. Though my life was not without hardship, the reshaping storms that envelop us all in this world were just a still forming shadow on the distant horizon. But I would soon discover that I am clay, being molded and transformed by the power of an unseen hand. There is a biblical teaching that states you must lose your life to find it. I would soon lose the life I knew. A new process of discovery would begin, but for a time, I was granted the gift of being shaped by the love of my family and friends, and the adventure of youth would continue.
My dad
he made it a priority in his life for us to have family activities. And so he would take us skiing, or he would take us, to this river, or he took us running and stuff like that just kind of helped, I think, definitely shape my love for activity. The other thing that I do think helped shape me was having a paper route when I was 8. And my dad, I mean, he's amazing. He would get up at like 3 a.m. for us to fold the papers and then go deliver. And then eventually my mom took that over. So my parents sacrificed a lot of their time to teach us how to work. And my dad took me down to the bank and made me memorize my bank account number, and made sure I put 30% of my earnings in savings. And I would say that definitely helped shape me. Moving forward into adulthood, I think, as most people, there's still a little bit of, I have no idea what I'm doing with my life. But at that point, when I graduated, I had kind of decided I was going to do music. So I was still kind of forming this idea of, I definitely knew I wanted to do something with music. I knew I wanted to teach. Still wasn't 100% sure as far as performing, what I wanted to do, but knew I wanted to do it. Knew that I wanted to stay active and figure out a way to continue to be, running or training or whatever that was going to look like. And then I definitely knew at some point I wanted to have a family. That was really important for me. No, when Roland came along, I was in a place where I was like, I do not need men. Yeah. Done. So that one kind of just hit me over the head. So I was not looking for that. So like I said, meeting Roland was like, I wasn't really looking for anything. I mean, probably I was, subconsciously, but consciously I was like, I don't want to get married right now. I have things I'm going to do with my life. I was going to go to a music school on the East Coast. And BYU Hawaii was just this pit stop for me because I'd graduated early and wasn't ready, to be at a really big college yet. But, we met and started hanging out, and I remember telling him, well, I don't, the first night that he told me he cared about me, I was like, I don't know if I feel that way. But despite that, we still kept hanging out because I definitely liked being around him. And then I definitely had what I like to call my clueless moment where I was like, okay, yeah, okay, all right. So we had our coming to, so to speak, if you want. And but I was still pretty young, so I wasn't. I really, really, really did not want to be married super young. And so for me, a lot of it was coming to the acceptance that was part of my plan, and why make the right person wait. So, there was a lot of things, I think, that came together that made it pretty obvious that we were supposed to be together. Marriage and a relationship like that changes you. I can say that it does. I think there's a lot of nuances that are hard to say. The biggest thing I would say is that there's a lot of self-discovery. You think you're one way, and then you're put in this situation where you're like, okay, maybe I'm not as much like that as I thought. Or, you see a lot of things that you need to work on on yourself. And I would say that's probably the biggest way, is just a lot of self-discovery. Having my first child, I realized I absolutely hate being pregnant. I hate it. But, is worth it. And the delivery was not awesome for my first. That was very traumatic. I realize now it was not a normal delivery. But I do remember, as soon as she came into the world, it was kind of like, it was all worth it. But I definitely had post-traumatic stress after. I was like, I don't know how there is even the human race. Why in their right minds would any woman continue this process? I'm not doing that again, right? Even though I'm I wouldn't go back and undo it because I loved this child that I now had, and the bond is amazing. It definitely changed me in a way I was unexpecting, as far as, what I thought was important and what I thought I needed to do, and my self-identity. And, it definitely became way less important as just making sure this beautiful new human was taken care of. Motherhood brought with it a connection that was deeper and more meaningful to me than I could ever have previously imagined. The instant love I had for my children was something that language fails to fully express. There is a parable in the Bible of a vine that represents our connection to our Maker and to others. It teaches that our growth in all respects, that our ability to blossom into who we are meant to be, is built on and grows out of this connection. I had been nourished and grown from my family roots, and I knew my children would also be dependent on this vine. My desire to love, nurture, teach, and protect these new tender branches was a sacred duty felt most profoundly. Life is mysterious in so many ways, and the road is often so very dark and foreboding. We see through a glass darkly, yet we pray and hope with all our hearts that in this darkness and gloom, we will be able to discern some of truth's light. We have faith that this light will illuminate enough of the correct path for us to follow. And by the light of faith, we strive to build our home, our framework of love, on a firm and solid foundation, on a rock, so that when the storms of life inevitably come and the terrible waves of adversity beat upon us, that which is most sacred will not be washed away with the tide. There are certain ambitions and dreams, the castles of sand we all build, that will not survive. This is the way of the human condition. I was soon to realize that in this life, we must lose much of ourselves. We must watch many things that are precious to us fly from our hands and disappear into the night. I learned to carry a faith in my heart that God loved me, and that this terrible process is not without purpose. I had to grow a faith that God would reveal to my heart the things that are truly of the greatest worth. I prayed these heavenly treasures would remain when the travail that was soon to come upon my soul was complete. The shadow that had been distant and faint on the horizon was now at the threshold of my door, and its terrible storm would change me forever. So, I guess as a little backstory, I was pretty fit before I had kids. I was doing a lot of triathlons, and I, that was kind of part of my self-identity, was being really fit and active. And I wasn't able to be as active as I imagined myself that I was going to be, through my first pregnancy. But I was able to kind of get right back into it. I did another triathlon, and that's actually how I found out I was pregnant with my second. I remember going into I was really struggling to just lose the weight again. Like I had lost it. And then I know, like, having your second, it gets harder or whatever. But I just felt so exhausted. And I remember going to see the midwife that I was seeing, and I came in and I just was like, I know I have 2 under 2. And that's insane. And I expect to be tired. But I feel like I'm dying. Like, I remember saying that to her, like, I just feel like I'm dying, like something's wrong. And, I'd had a little bit of postpartum depression, just kind of that transition of like having 0 time for yourself, and just kind of that normal process, I think. And so my midwife was like, I think you're depressed. And so she talked to me about that, and I was like, okay. But I just still felt like something was wrong. Like, why am I having such a hard time? Even though I would get up and put the baby monitor on and, be on the treadmill and then go up and nurse. And, I was really trying, but my energy was just like plummeting. I started drinking caffeine for the first time in my life, and it was just really struggling. So I was like, something's going on. And then I kind of started having these like aches in my chest. And I kind of thought, well, that's weird, because usually with mastitis you get a fever, but I just assumed, since I was breastfeeding, that it was related to that. And then also when I had been pregnant with Naomi, my first, they'd found a lump that we had to do a biopsy on, and they were like, well, it's a lactating adenoma. So then when I definitely started feeling a lump on when I was breastfeeding my second, I was like, oh, it's probably just that, because, breastfeeding's supposed to reduce your risk of getting cancer, right? That's not supposed to happen. So that wasn't even on my mind. It was just, something's wrong. I'm really, really tired. And I have this weird ache in my chest. I finally just felt like, you know what, I really need to go in, because when I would hug Roland, it felt like a foreign object in my chest. And so, I had a day where a bunch of students canceled lessons. And so I said, oh, I have time, I'll go in. And the doctor was like, oh, you're blah, blah, blah. It's so young, it's nothing. And then he felt my chest, and then I could tell he was trying to hide kind of the panic on his face. And I was like, oh, crap. So we went home and had this discussion, and then, got the call. It was, he basically rushed me into some testing, and then it was Thanksgiving. And I remember the Monday after Thanksgiving, he called, and I was like, oh, just give me the information over the phone. Like, I toyed with the idea, I'd even cried about it, but really was like, there's no way it's cancer. Like, I'm 29. I just finished breastfeeding my kids. Like, that reduces my risk. There's no way. I was healthy, right? But yeah, then it was just like, he started talking, and I literally, my brain was like spinning, and I was like, I think I actually do need to come in. I cannot comprehend what you're saying right now. So that was kind of how that went down. Finding out you have cancer is crazy. You're going through all kinds of stuff. Like, what? Just like utter shock, disbelief, devastated, like crying my eyes out, worrying about my kids. Like, what is this going to mean? Like, just all kinds of questions. What is this going to mean for my life? Like, am I going to die? Like, there's just like so much anxiety and uncertainty. So, doctor's visits, calling, it's just kind of a whirlwind of crazy, I would say. It's just crazy. My absolute number one fear was for my kids. Was like, how the heck are my kids gonna be? Like, how are they gonna be okay if I'm not here? Like, who's gonna take care of my kids? And then, like, they're so young, they're not even gonna remember me. Like, that was horrifying for me. It was horrifying for me to think about Roland marrying somebody else to take care of the kids. Like, that was horrifying. So I would say that was number one. Like, even more than the fear of actually dying was just leaving my kids and leaving Roland. Diagnosed with I believe the official was locally advanced stage 3 breast cancer, and I did have some hormone positive receptors, but HER2 new, which is very aggressive cancer. So, we saw a lot of different doctors. We even tried to go like alternative methods, but both of us just felt really strongly that it was too far advanced to do alternative methods, and that I needed to do what I could to be here for the kids that I had. We talked about trying to like preserve eggs for maybe having kids, but then when we even started that process, we were seeing like a reproductive specialist or fertility doctor, whatever you want to call them. But then just with how far that was going to push back the start of treatment, both of us just started feeling really bad about that, and that wasn't the right option. So that was actually really hard. That was probably one of the hardest things we did, was just giving up, or putting that in the hands of God. Like, okay, I don't have a choice. So up to that point, just kind of like, I felt bad for ever like saying I never wanted a lot of kids. I felt guilty. Because then it was like, okay, I can't, right? And then all of a sudden you want, right, what you can't have. So, I mean, and whether or not that door was going to be closed permanently was an uncertainty. We didn't know. But we both kind of felt like, hey, we did everything we could do. So now it's out of our hands. Like, we'll just see what happens. But that was hard. Because right before I was diagnosed, we were thinking about having another one, and so I was really glad that I wasn't pregnant when I found out. So we worked through that process, started treatment, and people talk to you about what treatment's going to be like, and I had my own ideas, because I was like, well, I've always been, not to sound too cheesy, but I kind of always identified with this sort of warrior archetype, right? Like, I just fight my way through everything. I work hard. I'm strong. So I really had in my head that I was going to be not like Lance Armstrong, but kind of like, I'm going to beat the odds and be able to do what I, want to do anyway, even though I'm going to struggle and it's going to be hard. I still had these ideas of doing that. On the slogan, like, fight like a girl, right? Because, that was me. But I think what, and I'll come back to that, but ultimately, I think, even though you're fighting physically, because, and don't get me wrong, there is a real physical fight going on when you're dealing with cancer treatment. But I think the biggest thing is just the mental battles, and people don't really realize, not everyone doesn't realize, but a lot of people don't realize, like, that's a real issue. Like, I remember I had someone ask me, like, why are you using that slogan? Like, it's not like you're really fighting, you're just laying in bed, right? And I just was like, you have no idea. Like, you have no idea. Like you're clueless. I remember someone asking, and I just was like, there's a real fight going on, and I'm sorry that I can't explain what that is to you, or that you're not going to get it, but I think it's just that mental battle of not getting stuck in the why, and not getting there's this constant battle of like who you are basically dies. Like your life, at least my life, the way I knew it, was over, done. Like, and so just kind of accepting new limitations. And trying to find that balance of like not being limited, but finding kind of a new way to navigate based on the realities of the situation, and finding new ways to do things, because the old ways didn't work. And there was the mastectomy, and we flew to Cleveland for that, just Roland and I, and that was hard. I didn't even want to look at myself for like weeks after that. I was really grateful for the nurse that came, and I just like turn away, and she changed all the bandages, and I was like, I don't want to deal with it. This isn't real, right? So that was hard. Sorry. And then there's whole, issues with that, mental battles with that you have to fight. And then after that I did radiation, and again I was like, okay, I'm gonna handle radiation. Oh my gosh, that wiped me out so much more than I thought it was going to. And then after the radiation, I still continued that Herceptin, and then I had to start the tamoxifen. Oh my gosh, which was like hell in a bottle. And then they also had me put in an IUD, because they really basically wanted me in induced menopause through all the chemo treatment, but also like, you can't get pregnant. So I had some copper IUD, and then I had Lupron every month. It was like everything. Let's throw everything in the kitchen sink at you, right? Which on one hand, you're grateful for all the modern medical advances they have to fight all that stuff. But on the other hand, you're like, oh, side effects suck. So I would say that I mean, even though everything was really hard and a struggle, I would say I handled the chemo really well. I had a lot of people praying for me, and I honestly felt like the support of all of that. And I remember just like this pure elation when I finished, right? I wouldn't say that I really started to have huge mental struggles until, other than like, you know, being worried about dying and my kids and all of that. But as far as like depression and stuff, like not just being depressed about something for a while, that really started to hit with the tamoxifen. Like, not that I never went through periods of depression, or not that I wasn't ever prone to it. Like, you know, I had periods as a teenager, and I had obviously periods after like postpartum and things like that. But yeah, it was like crazy town. I was reading this vet's, there was a story in the news about a veteran who'd taken his life, and they kind of had posted the letter that he wrote to his parents, and I read it. Probably shouldn't have, but I read it, and I found myself like completely identifying with his reasons, and like yeah.
This process of being broken down and reshaped was harder than anything I'd ever experienced or could have dreamed. I think nothing can prepare you for how difficult some of life's experiences are, how all-encompassing and life-changing they can be, mentally, spiritually, and physically. You are forced to let go of so many things. The flame of your dreams is blown out, and you must watch your hopes fly away on the wind while you are left scrambling to find new, concrete ones to hold on to. This path was so difficult that, if I'm being honest, there were times when I felt it wasn't even worth it. Yet deep in my soul, I knew this could not be true. I knew if I had faith, He who has been proclaimed the Good Shepherd would guide me. My greatest challenges would become the key that would unlock the doorway to my salvation. When this terrible night was past, I would awake to the dawn of a deeper understanding of myself and of all things. God would place true beauty, now redefined, into my hands.
I felt just like I was being altered, if that makes sense. So it was just this crazy. I feel like kind of like remodeling a house. That was like, we're tearing down this wall. Everything is just right. And I feel like now, kind of in, I don't know if there's ever an end phase to it, but I think just working on more positive self-talk and being able to recognize, you know, your triggers and kind of the places you tend to go, and figuring out ways to kind of, like I said, it's that mental battle, figuring out, you know, battlements to put in place so you don't fall in that ditch mentally, you know. And that's kind of what my process is right now, is just being really self-aware. I would say I have definitely become more self-aware, more empathetic, and so I just work on applying that to myself and just learning to be okay and loving myself for the new normal that I wouldn't have been okay with before. Like, my normal now, I would have not been okay with, you know, before. Whereas now, it's like, okay, but you have to accept yourself where you are before you can move forward. And I would say that's probably, like, been the biggest way that I've been trying to change my thinking, is, you know, accepting where you are now and then moving forward. I read a book that used this metaphor that I liked, that it's not really this sort of arch, it's more like a spiral. You know, you definitely, and sometimes you spiral down back into your anger and denial, and then you can come back up, and you're kind of constantly in these different processes of dealing with it, but hopefully it's kind of this spiral upward, even though I'm going kind of around and around through different emotions and mental states. I don't feel like I can ever say like I've arrived at being self-accepting, but there definitely are moments where I am, right? I can't say that I've arrived at being completely anger-free of not being angry about my situation. There are definitely times where that spiral kind of comes back around to anger or whatever. But overall, it's kind of this, most of the time, spiral upward, that it's this moving process rather than a finished thing. I look back on a lot of the things that I was able to do, my capabilities. And it's hard because I'm not as capable as I used to be. I'm just not. Like, I used to be the kind of person, like when I did a show, I not only memorized my lines, I knew everybody else's lines, everybody else's songs. And I wasn't even trying to memorize them. I just picked it up in practice. Like, I would memorize entire movies. Like, before kids had DVDs in the cars, this is the way my brothers and I and sister entertained ourselves, is we had our favorite movies memorized, and on road trips we would just recite them. And so I had this great memory, and I don't have that anymore. Like, whatever it is about the chemical process of chemo, I mean, chemo brain, they talk about it being a real thing. It's a real thing. Like, I don't have the capacity anymore. I forget stuff. I forget what I'm doing during the day. I forget people's birthdays, which I was always very good at, like, helping people feel really special on their birthday and remembering. But I forget. I'll even remember, go to text them and get distracted and forget, so it's like, just the capacity. I have neuropathy in my fingers, so playing the piano isn't the same. I have damaged lungs from radiation, so singing isn't the same. Which is hard, and obviously I'm not going to stop doing those things, but I have to kind of work through that. So my old self is gone in that way. I would say there are some things that are good. I would say that I don't ever see myself as a super judgmental person. I felt like I was a very inclusive person, but I do feel like now I'm non-judgmental on a whole new level. And so, I'm more empathetic on a whole new level. It's just on a whole new level. Like, I would say I was very empathetic before. But there's just it's different when you've gone through something where you can just relate on a whole different level. I would say my testimony has grown, and I mean, there are times like the spiral, right, where it kind of dips down and goes back up, and but I think overall, better, deeper. I think my relationship with my husband, even though it went through some really rough patches, I think we're going to ultimately be stronger because we had to address issues that are hard to work through, but ultimately cultivate better understanding of yourself and each other. The whole situation kind of forced addressing those things, on like a much deeper level than maybe we would have before. I do think, if you're talking about connecting with someone who's maybe also going through a struggle, a lot of breast cancer survivors joke about once you have breast cancer, you're just it's like this immediate connection. And it's kind of crazy because it is a little bit true. Once you have gone through something like that's that life altering, I feel like you can extend that to even people that necessarily aren't going through cancer, but have been through a horrible loss or horrible accident. There's just certain nuances about the struggle that,
you kind of can connect with about another person, where you don't really even have to say it. You're just kind of like, I get it. And on like a small level, I think it changes some of the things you say to them, or it changes maybe some of the things you would do, or and again, it's really subtle differences, but there is just kind of like an understanding and a connection in that way.
There is a scripture that states, "Except a grain of wheat fall to the earth and die, it abideth by itself alone. But if it die, it will bring forth much fruit." This can be a very difficult process. And there are secret, lonely places hidden away in the chambers of our heart, places where we hold the pain that shapes and molds us. But love is the force that allows us to heal and grow, to bear the fruit of our hardships. It was the love of God, of my family and friends, that nourished and sustained me. Part of me had fallen to the earth and died, yet my capacity to connect with, feel empathy and compassion for, and to understand others increased. Though every day is still a struggle, and I have my days where I slide backward, there is a greater desire to help others feel the healing love upon which we all depend.
Talk about, when people are on their deathbed, you're not worried about how much money you've made or whatever. I could say there's definitely truth to that. Family relationships become really important. And I think the farther away you get, it's just kind of natural for that. Maybe you have to kind of remember how strongly you felt that moving forward. But I would say that I definitely, like my desires to have good family relationships has definitely increased. Okay, so I would say a couple of the biggest things I've learned from this experience, and this is kind of covering the beginning all the way to kind of where I am at now. I definitely learned that we have a compassionate God. That struggles are one of the best ways we learn and progress. And, I had a friend say it to me once. She was like, I wouldn't wish going through cancer on my worst enemy, but I also wouldn't trade the experience. And at first, I was like in the beginning when she told me, and I was like, that's crazy. Like, you're crazy. Like, I'm glad for you, but you're crazy. But then afterwards, I was like, I get what she's saying. Like, there's a lot of special experiences, a lot of relationships, that are closer that you wouldn't go back and change. Was it hard? Absolutely. But I don't know that I would go back and undo it, which I didn't think I would say, but I can say that. I've already mentioned, I feel like I learned a lot of empathy, understanding, patience. I feel like I learned a lot about love. I feel like I still struggle to put what I learned sometimes to apply it because of current struggles and stuff. But I can definitely say I learned a lot about faith and love and hope through going through that experience. I learned a lot about myself, and definitely still working on it, but the importance of accepting where you're at in order to move forward. And I think that's and accepting where other people are at in order to move forward. And again, working on applying that consistently. I learned a lot about the power of prayer. I leaned on God, absolutely. I read scriptures every day. I prayed every day, and I felt people praying for me. Getting through the treatment part, I think that's what got me through. And then even when I went through my crazy anger, depression, I would look back on those experiences, and that is what got me through that time. My message is you need other people, and you need to let other people help you. I mean, I think just my personality, I'm one of those people that tends to, I'm pretty open, I think, on some level, about like talking about what happens, this happened, I went through this. A lot of people feel like they have to keep their diagnosis really private. And everybody has different ways they cope, and maybe that is the right thing for them. But accepting help, I feel like, is huge. And it's there's no shame in accepting help from other people, and you need other people to get through this. Absolutely.
Was enduring worth it?
Oh my gosh, Greg. Oh my gosh, was enduring worth it? There are times where I'm like, no, I should have taken my ticket out of here. Like there were definitely periods where I was like, why did I even do chemo? What the heck? Where I'm like, my quality of life now is like, did I want to do that? I don't know. We've definitely talked about if it comes back, I don't know if I'd do chemo again, right? Just because of how long it's taken me to get back. And like, sometimes I'm like, I'd rather just have a quality shorter time with my kids than, be in bed and not be able to see them, right? But I can say yes, it was worth it. Definitely worth it. I mean, I'm here, and I know I wouldn't be here if I hadn't endured, and that's really important for my family. And I'm grateful to have the opportunity to, like I said, do better, try to do good in the world, and hopefully make something beautiful out of the ashes. I mean, the biggest thing I want to give my kids is the ability to have their own testimony, but that's something they have to do themselves. I can't do that for them. But hopefully I can provide enough example of how important it is to have a relationship with your Heavenly Father to get through hard times. That's probably the best thing I can offer them is the example of how that's helped me through it, and hopefully give them the desire to want to have a relationship with their Heavenly Father.
We live in a fallen world where the scales of justice are not balanced. Suffering and injustice are everywhere, and often that which is truthful and right does not prevail. Innocence and purity are trampled under the foot of ignorance, cruelty, and blindness. The difficulties, inequities, and trials of this world pierce us right to our core. All of us deal with trials and hardships. All of us may feel as though we are tossed about on an unstable sea, but each of us is a light, a flame shining through the darkness, and in an unjust world, our trials can help us connect to others and improve the human family as a whole. I lean on the sacrifices my predecessors have made and those of my contemporaries, these noble souls who have held to the promised hope that the sacrifices God asks of each of us are not in vain, and are walking forward with the faith that through
our collective suffering and sacrifice, the blindness within ourselves and the blindness in the world at large will be healed. I know I stand on the shoulders of my loving brothers and sisters. I feel whatever part God asks for me to play in His great plan, I should offer it up willingly, for I am part of that great tree of life, where we are all joined together and reliant on each other. We are all refugees lost in the night, trying to find our way through the darkness and fog, looking to the distant horizon, trying to find our true home, that great heavenly city whose builder and maker is God, that home which lies beyond the shores of the suffering of this world. Our sacrifices are not about what we will get in this world, but what will be created and built in that kingdom beyond, where we are all one, the human family joined together in unity and love. It is this hope that can help us to take up our cross and follow the Good Shepherd in making the sacrifices that will bring the entire human family home. The cost being paid by all of God's children to move this work forward is so humbling. I remind myself to strive to submit to God's will and let go of my own ambitions, knowing this collective cross we all carry transforms into the gateway that leads us home. We go to a home where each individual soul is accounted for and matters, where not a hair of their heads is forgotten before God. A home where the contributions, rights, and dignity of each individual person are understood and held as sacred, where the one lost sheep matters as much as the 99. A home where no one is trampled underfoot and lost in the sea of collective faces. It is through each individual sacrifice that the collective wisdom is built. As the individual is indebted to the great family tree, the tree is indebted to the individual. We exist in great importance together. The sanctity of each precious individual is the sanctity of the whole. Knowing the important place we all have in this great framework gives my life and struggles purpose. Let us have faith that the divides between us that seem impossible to bridge will one day be leaped across through God's grace and power. Let us have faith that the forces that act upon us, which we cannot control, will guide us towards enlightenment. All of us are vagabonds and refugees traveling in a world fallen and foreign to us. We must have faith that one day we will arrive on the shores of the promised land. Together as one, we will rejoice in our unity. We will finally come home to the peace and rest that can only be found in the bonds of love.